joining today. I really appreciate your time, and then also what you're doing to participating in Summit Care and taking the energy and effort on your health journey, because that is a big step for a lot of people, including myself in my own health journeys. Just as a reminder, I'm Kevin Caserta. I'm blessed to serve as our medical director for population health for Summit Pacific Medical Center. And then also clinically, I'm a physiatrist, so physical medicine and rehabilitation. I take care of several different groups of individuals. One group is a lot of times I take care of people with neurologic disabilities, so strokes, multiple sclerosis, spinal cord injuries, and things to that extent. But then in addition, I really have a passion just to help people on their wellness journeys, right? Sometimes where there's obstacles and barriers, and I just love talking and partnering and figuring out how to solve problems. Really, these two people deserve an incredible hand. I want to acknowledge Lisa just for her incredible work and partnership in coordinating everything and getting this arranged, and Madison for helping getting the schedules and figuring out the technical issues, which I think I would still be struggling if you weren't here. So thank you for that, Madison. So we're going to talk today about some health basics and then also some sustainable ways to improve your health, right? Because we can make some crazy schemes together, but if it's too complex, it's not going to work. And so let's figure it out. So what we'll do is, I bet I'm not pointing right. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to just pop the button here. Sorry. Just take me one. Okay, I can do this one. Okay, figure it out. So what we're going to be talking about today, first of all, we'll talk about some health fallacies. There's things that I heard when I was younger, and I thought they were the truth about health, and the reality is they're not necessarily the truth about health. And so I want to talk about those. The second thing is there's some things that we know from science, and we'll actually go over a couple studies. We'll go into incredible detail. If you want more detail, happy to share it though, about what we know for a fact improves people's lives, both in terms of quality and also duration of life. Then we're going to talk a little bit, as we did during the kind of the introductory panel, a little bit more about habits and how to form those habits. And as I stated before, really want to spend the time for questions. This is really about you and how you can optimize your time today. So take advantage of me, take advantage of the group, meaning maybe somebody's talking about, hey, I can't get this better. You may have an idea. So we're all going to work together to figure out what is best. So the first fallacy is the food pyramid. Who here remembers the food pyramid, maybe up either in your grade school class or up on television somewhere? Well, the interesting thing is, it's not actually what's the healthiest thing for us. If you note the classic food pyramid, what you see are a lot of simple carbohydrates, where you really maximize eating rice, breads, remember Wonder Bread that was so popular, all those simple carbohydrates. And if any of you guys have diabetes, you know for a fact that's something that you're supposed to avoid. And in fact, I grew up most of my life thinking, that I need to eat 5 to 7 servings of simple carbohydrates. And even if you look here of kind of what a basic menu is, they're talking about eating either cereal or bread and butter at every single meals and adding a baked potato. I'm not saying that you can't occasionally have a baked potato, but really simple carbohydrate based. The second thing is really talking about only 4 servings of fruits and vegetables a day, which is probably not enough. Really focus on meats, milk as well. And I've actually heard from several sources that the dairy lobbyists who supported the dairy industry really pushed to make sure that milk was included as a high priority on the food pyramid. Not saying, once again, not to ever drink milk, but there was that push from the dairy industry as well. And then the one thing they do say is don't eat a lot of fats, desserts, things like that. And that's, as you can imagine, is absolutely correct. So I want to show you two different types of pyramids, and really they're very similar. One is a new pyramid that's been invented called the healthy eating pyramid. Love the name. And then the other is the Mediterranean diet. And this is actually a very popular diet, and studies have shown that places in the world that naturally eat these, they tend to live longer. In fact, it's what's called blue zones. Blue zones are part of the country where people live to 100 and sometimes even more, and they tend to live very healthy lives really well into their 80s, 90s, and doing those things. And besides activity and having groups of people coming together, also having some sort of faith base, those individuals also eat these types of diets. If you notice, they're very similar. And in fact, I love also they put in the emphasis of activity, right? Because what we know is it's not just the calories that we consume, it's the calories we burn. And so by being more active, by increasing both your aerobic activity, we'll talk a little bit more about that, as well as your strengthening, what they call resistance work, we actually burn more calories and we're healthier in general. So you keep up with your exercise, obviously calorie moderation, and just pound the vegetables. And then some fruits as well, 5 to 7, and switching from 5 to 7 servings and switching from more simple carbohydrates to more complex carbohydrates. So obviously those are your vegetables, but also whole grains, things to that extent as well, are really much better for you. They lower your basically blood sugars on top of that, as opposed to the simple carbohydrates that are just quickly digested. Still having some level of meats, fish, poultry, and eggs in particular, but then also adding nuts and seeds and legumes. And so, for instance, some people ask, well, what are some good snacks? Almonds and other nuts are great. They have what you call unsaturated fats in them. They actually help to lower your cholesterol, bring in lower the bad cholesterol and raise your HDL or your good cholesterol. Where the saturated fats are basically the ones that tend to be more solid, that you could see it like, Crisco, if you remember, you kind of scoop out that Crisco. That's an example of a saturated fat. So decreasing that, still, having some calcium sources are good. So I'm not saying not to drink milk or not to ever eat cheese. Have some red meat, but not very frequently if you do enjoy red meats. And the Mediterranean diet, says actually, and there has been some studies suggest that some red wine is good. Now, obviously, it's not drinking the whole bottle of red wine. It's a glass of red wine or something to that extent. What do you guys think about this type of pyramid and how it's switched over time?
I think it's better.
Yeah.
A lot better.
Yeah. Is it hard to find these types of foods in this area? I'm just kind of curious. If you go to the grocery stores and things to that extent.
Not hard to find, but it's sometimes hard to find at a reasonable price.
Yeah. It's interesting. I have a colleague, Dr. Heisler, and some of you see him as a primary care provider. And Dr. Heisler always says, eat at the outskirts of the grocery store. Meaning, the meat aisle, kind of the seafood aisle, the vegetable aisle, they're kind of the outskirts, right? And then in the middle is a lot of the junk. And if you look, it's those simple carbohydrates that are really inexpensive to make, and so therefore they're cheaper, and they taste really good because they have sugar in them and sometimes fat too, which tastes really good. But going to the outside to get your food, and then some of you might be part of the Food RX program as well, where we're trying to do a balance. You can't change people's diets too much, but bring in some of those healthier alternatives. Questions about the food pyramids? Perfect. So second fallacy is, if I can't get 30 minutes of exercise a day, I might as well not do it. And I remember when I was younger, and even I have to remind my son who's turning 16 and likes to work out, okay, Joseph, any workout is better than none. Now the guidelines, so if you look at the CDC, Center for Disease Control and Prevention, they would recommend at least 150 minutes. So if you think about that, it's 2.5 hours of aerobic exercise. A lot of people talk about, what your pulse needs to be. That's great if you can be in that much detail. I would suggest for you, it's just know what your pulse count is and try to get a little bit higher, right? Or moderately higher is a good way to know that you're getting aerobic exercise. You don't have to necessarily count what your pulse is unless you have a cardiac condition or something to that, in which case it's recommended for you. And then on top of it, I want to spread that out over the course of 3 days. Meaning don't do all of it in one day. If you want to do 150 minutes of exercise in a day, that's great. But ideally, you're doing exercise kind of spread out throughout the week. And then adding that resistance exercise. Resistance exercise is strengthening. Some people use weights and things to that extent. But there's other ways to do it. For instance, have you seen people do planks? For instance, where you're lying on the ground and you're kind of just holding yourself up in a sit-up position. Yeah, it's basically a resistance exercise where you strengthen your core muscles through here, and then your pecs and your triceps as well. The great thing about resistance exercise is it adds muscle mass. And muscle mass not only just looks good and makes you stronger, but it does a couple things. First of all, it makes your bones stronger too. And as we get older, we're more likely to get conditions like osteoporosis or osteopenia with weaker bones, right? And so you're more likely to fall. In addition, good muscle strength also helps with your balance. And so if we do kind of trip or somewhat fall in one direction or another, then what occurs is if we're stronger, we're more likely to catch ourselves. And the final thing that great about adding muscle strength is muscle burns more calories than fat. And so if you convert a pound of fat to a pound of muscle, you may not have lost weight, right, theoretically, but you could actually then eventually lose weight because you'll be burning more calories or eat more because the muscle takes more energy to maintain itself. But here's the reality is, there's some weeks that anybody who tries to work out regularly may not be able to meet that. And that's okay. Ideally, yes, we all want to get the 150 minutes, 150 of aerobic activity, adding a few days of strengthening activity. But studies have shown that even the least amount of activity is better than none. So they've actually looked at people with diabetes, so they have high blood sugars, right? And even if they just stand every 30 minutes, you actually lower your blood sugars more than if you just stay seated. And so you're having a bad day, you're sick, you're not feeling well, still do something. And it may just be walking in your house kind of back and forth in your hallways for 10 minutes, or maybe you have steps in your home, going up and down the steps a few times. You're going to be burning more calories, lowering your blood sugar, and making yourself stronger. And then ideally, ultimately get to that 150 minutes, right? But anything is better than nothing when it comes to exercise. Look like you got a question about exercise. Okay, perfect. So next, has anyone ever been on a diet where it was really a almost fasting diet or liquid diet where you lost weight really quickly? Got at least one?
I was on one.
I'm sorry?
I was on one, it wasn't fasting, it was the HCG drugs.
Uh-huh.
And, and eating 3 times a day and certain things you had to cut out. I lost weight.
How fast did you lose it?
I lost 34 pounds in 32 days.
And then what happened after that?
My ex moved into my driveway.
Oh.
I kicked it all back.
Pretty quickly?
Yes.
Yeah. And that's the problem about diets where you lose a lot of weight, and there's tons of them. In fact, there'll probably be 10 new books about some sort of, they call them fad diets, that will come out this year because people love the idea of losing weight quickly. And I think we all do, right? We love, especially in the United States, our Amazon society, we want what we want and we want it right away. Unfortunately, that's not the healthiest way to lose weight. And when we lose weight, a couple things. The first is, if you're on a very restrictive diet, it's very hard to maintain. Because our body naturally craves, and our body actually wants to maintain the weight that we're at. And God's made us and made our metabolism to adjust to maintain the weight that we have become. Okay? And so if we're restricted diet, then we start to get cravings, and quite frankly, it's just really hard to do. And then what happens is eventually we stop. The second thing that we often don't think about is, yes, eating tastes good and it makes us feel better after we eat, but there's a huge social component to eating as well. And sometimes when we get on a very restrictive diet, then we don't want to get out to be around other people who are eating stuff, or it just becomes too hard because our family's eating something incredibly different than we're eating, right? And so socially and just mentally, then it becomes very difficult. But here's the big risk of those significant diets is we begin to lower our metabolism. And so our body wants to maintain whatever weight that we are currently. And so our body's thinking that we've now gone into starvation mode. And the way that when somebody goes into starvation mode survives is slowing the metabolism, meaning we burn less calories. And so what happens is we're burning less calories, metabolism slows. Very hard to maintain a restrictive diet. So what do? Eventually we stop it. And then with the slower metabolism, you actually regain that weight very quickly, and you can actually gain more weight now because your metabolism is slow. And so it's better not to go on too large of a calorie restriction at one time. Other things that can happen, you'll start to lose muscle. And you probably have seen people who've lost a lot of weight at one time, and you look at them, and you're like, wow, it looks like they lost some muscle weight because they lose some muscle as well because you actually burn some of that muscle, which is really hard to maintain. And so when you do diet, first of all, obviously, we're going to talk about how to do it sensibly, but then the second is it's good to add some of those strengthening exercises, resistant exercises as well. The second thing is our body needs nutrients. And in some of those diets, what occurs is you're actually, and it's not all of them, some of them are better than others, but some of them, you just see, the one that is always popular is the grapefruit diet, probably back when I was much younger, but you start to not get the right level of calories and the right nutrients as well, which leads to deficiencies, decreased energy, other problems as well. And so generally what they recommend is people lose 1 to 2 pounds a week. It may not seem like a lot, but over the course of a year, you can really begin to get there. So if you lose 8 pounds, a month, 10 pounds maybe at most a month, you're still going to begin to lose a good amount of weight, but it's much more gradual than some of these fad diets. Now, each person is different, and depending on what your weight, if you're working with Sarah or a different dietitian, she may see something a little bit different. But in general, it's 1 to 2 pounds a week. And that's a good level of weight to lose, which is safe. And generally, you won't slow your metabolism that much because it's very subtle to the body. Questions about weight loss? Yes?
What can we do to What can we do to increase our metabolism as we're losing weight?
Sure. And one of the best things is exercise. And so you combine both some aerobic exercise because you actually burn calories. And then the second thing is the strengthening exercises because you're trying to build and maintain muscle. And then that will also keep your metabolism higher.
Okay.
So if you, excuse me. So if you're adding that muscle, it's going to help. And then still eat some protein. Mm-hmm. And in fact, there are, some people have tried those keto diets.
Right.
That's been shown actually most recently been shown to probably to be actually negative for people because you could actually raise your cholesterol. I actually had a friend who was on the keto diet when I lived in Seattle, and I watched him, and he took a hamburger patty, put bacon and cheese on it, and then took another hamburger patty and ate that, and he was thinking he was being healthy. Well, yes, he was in a ketosis, meaning he was excreting calories from his urine and was losing weight, but his cholesterol goes up. And so that's what you need to watch. You still need a good amount of protein, but you really could supplement that with the vegetables. The other advantage of vegetables are they fill you up. And so they make you feel full more quickly and you tend to eat less.
Mm.
So personally, I still like a well-balanced diet rather than just like a keto diet or something to that extent. And a general calorie restriction rather than a massive calorie restriction. It's really slow and steady, something that you can live with. And we'll talk about some tricks, and I mentioned to some of you before as well, about some easy things that you can do to actually decrease calories that we don't often think about. Okay? Okay. What's interesting is sometimes we put ourselves, each of our medical conditions, in a box. Let's say I'm a little overweight, I have diabetes, I have high cholesterol, I have maybe colon cancer. Well, the reality is many of the risk factors that we have are related. So in fact, by getting my cholesterol better under control, getting my diabetes under better control, my high blood pressure under control, I can actually protect myself from a lot of things. So, obesity, high cholesterol, getting those better, improving your diet, stopping smoking if you smoke, and inactivity, those are actually all risk factors for not just heart disease, which you all could tell me that's right. They're also risk factors for colon cancer. And so by doing all of that, we can decrease our risk for a lot of different things. So medical conditions are complex, but they're often connected. And by getting on top of a few things, you get on top of actually a lot of different conditions. So that's the great news. By doing what you're doing now, you're going to make yourself healthier in so many different ways. So let's talk a little bit about the research of health. And the great news is these are big studies looking at a lot of people. You're going to look at this and you're like, oh, this all makes sense to me. Because it does. And then each of these studies is going to show you almost exactly the same thing. So this is the inner heart study. So a very large study looking at cardiovascular disease. So heart attacks, things like that, vascular disease. It had 30,000 people, so a very large study. And it's diverse. It's across multiple countries, 52 countries specifically. And so you're looking at a lot of people with lots of different genetics. And what they found was that there were 9 potentially modifiable risk factors. So things that each of us can do to potentially make it better, whether it be by diet and exercise, medications, or a combination, or changing activities that will help. So factors, nothing surprising here, that increase our risks for heart disease. It's tobacco use, what do you call dyslipidemia or high cholesterol, specifically, hypertension, diabetes, obesity. In particular, men tend to be more abdominally obese, but women tend to carry more of the weight in the hips. But it could be either. But so obesity around your abdomen, in particular, and then psychological factors as well, such as stress and depression. And it really shows how we as individuals, we're complex and one thing relates to another, right? If we're stressed or depressed, well, that's going to change how I eat. And it may change my activity level and things to that extent as well. And so really working with all of these factors to make things better. And then things that lower our risk. Nothing surprising here either. Regular physical activity, as we discussed. Daily consumption of fruits and vegetables lower your risk for heart disease. And then daily consumption of small amounts of alcohol. It's down to the red wine. If you don't want to drink red wine, that is perfectly fine. You don't have to drink red wine, but there are studies that suggest like a glass of red wine or something a day lowers your risk for heart disease. A similar study was produced in the annuals of internal medicine, and that looked at people 45 to 79 years of age and their risk factor for cardiovascular disease. And they found that there was 5 factors that probably contributed to 50% of cardiovascular deaths. Once again, very similar: elevated cholesterol, diabetes, hypertension, obesity, and smoking. And we'll go over just one more, but very supportive as well. And so this is the Nurses' Health Study, and looked at nurses as they were kind of getting along further in their career, a large amount of them, 121,000. right? And you think of nurses and you think generally nurses would be pretty healthy. And for the most part, they were. But what they found is 84% reduction in their risk for heart disease or cardiovascular disease if they did these 4 things. 1, maintain a desirable body weight. 2, ate a healthy diet, the Mediterranean diet specifically. Exercise regularly, and they didn't smoke. And so those who were overweight, never smoked, exercised, and did those things, they lived, 12 to 14 years longer on average by modifying those risk factors. So the good news is, we're in control of our health. Nobody's perfect, right? And we have genetic components, social components, lots of other components that contribute to our health. But many of these things we can do. And the other good news is if we do them, and do them perfectly, we still make ourselves a little bit better, right? People aren't perfect. I love ice cream. If my wife buys ice cream, I'm going to eat it, right? And I know I shouldn't eat it because it's high in cholesterol, high in fat and stuff. But can I do something else to make myself as healthy as possible and still occasionally enjoy a bowl of ice cream? And so what diet to eat, as I mentioned, it's absolutely the Mediterranean plant-based diets specifically, where you really focus in on vegetables and fruit, for the nutrition. They fill you up. So I always recommend people start by eating your vegetables because you'll eat less of the other stuff. It's also good, once again, to help prevent colon cancer and other cancers as well. Minimal meats and saturated fats. Now, do you guys know the difference, and it's okay, between like a saturated and an unsaturated fat? Okay, so I'll just briefly talk about the chemistry, okay? So saturated fats basically don't have any bonds between them. And basically they tend to be solids at room temperature, specifically, as opposed to an unsaturated fat, which would be like olive oil. So it'd be like the difference between using Crisco oil to cook in or butter to cook in versus olive oil. In general, when you think about, or canola oil, which is maybe not quite as good as for you as olive oil, but better than, once again, lard or anything to that extent, specifically. Meats tend to be, like red meats in particular, tend to be very high in that saturated fat, okay? Dark meat tends to have a little bit more saturated fat than white meat, and that's why often people say, we should eat the white meat rather than dark meat. Olives, fish, most types of fish, I'm speaking in generalities, nuts, they tend to have much more likely to have those good fats that are better for you, which actually lower your cholesterol and lower your risk for heart disease specifically. Lower the LDL, which is a bad cholesterol, and increase the HDL specifically, which is the good cholesterol in our bodies, and lower your triglyceride level, which is kind of your fat content in your blood as well. So those are the main differences when you look. And when you look at kind of the calories and whatnot, the nutritional ingredients, most of them will tell you, how much saturated fats that an ingredient does. And the idea is to try to get that as low as possible. And they'll even tell you what % of your daily allowance. So if it's not a large part of your daily allowance, then sorry, that's my phone, I'll just ignore it. If it's not a large part of daily allowance, then it's probably okay. If it's 50% of your daily allowance and it's 1 meal, then maybe something that you want to try to avoid there. So like I mentioned, fish is all right. Whole grains, beans, nuts, those sorts of things are very heart healthy. And then generally, if it's a processed food, it may taste really good, but it's probably not good for you because those tend to be simple carbohydrates, higher in sugar, and higher in saturated, the bad fat content. Speaking in generalities, right? You need to look for yourself. Smoking, I'll just talk about it real briefly. Most of us know some of the risk factors for smoking cigarettes. But if we look worldwide, tobacco use is probably the most number one cause of what we call premature morbidity or mortality, meaning chances of getting sick or even potentially dying. And here's the good news, because I know smoking is really hard to stop smoking. I've had family members, friends, obviously people I work with clinically, and it's incredibly hard to do. But the good news is, number one, we're happy and we have programs to help you stop smoking. But let's say you smoke a pack a day or a pack and a half a day. If you even stop and do like half as much, you're actually lowering risk factors. And so if you do smoke, smoke the least that you possibly can smoke for better health. All right? And the benefits of smoking cessation, the great thing is when we look at heart disease specifically, in only a few months, you've actually now improved your risk for heart, or lowered your risk for heart disease incredibly. And the even better news is that in several years, your risk for heart disease are like if you never smoked. And so you can greatly lower your risk for heart disease almost right away by stopping to smoke. Now, unfortunately, so you can never quit smoking too late for your heart. Now, unfortunately, cancer risk isn't quite the same. But still, by stopping smoking in 10 years, you probably now have in-between risk of if you never smoked or if you continue to smoke. So still try to stop from the cancer perspective as well. And then we do have a great tobacco abstinence program that we have going. Happy to talk about that if people have questions or referrals to that program, because they really do a great job in helping people stop smoking, because it's really hard to do. Did I jump ahead one? No, okay. So I know each of you received that book, Atomic Habits, and we'll talk a little bit more about that today. So who here has ever made a New Year's resolution? Who here has had at least one New Year's resolution that didn't make it that very far in the year? Anyone have a good story about one that they made and made it last? Because New Year's resolutions are really, really hard, aren't they? And there's a couple reasons. One, we're inspired by a short period of time, and then we get back to our regular life. But the other thing is when we make a big jump, right? Well, I want to go climb Mount Rainier this year. I don't. But let's say I wanted to climb Mount Rainier. That's a really big, hard thing to do. And it's easy to say, you know what? I don't have to climb Mount Rainier. I know what I was thinking. And not do that, right? And so a resolution is a firm decision to do something generally pretty big, or potentially not to do something. Maybe it's I want to stop a bad habit that I want to do. It tends to be goal-directed. You're filled with hope and vigor, and then it gets hard and we stop. And that's happened to me, and you guys can thank you for that. It sounds like it's happened to all of us. Where a habit becomes a routine, it's ingrained, it is part of who we are because we do it almost every single day and sometimes multiple times in a day, right? I don't know when this started for myself, but after I see, let's say I examine someone physically, in a physical exam as a patient, I actually now, I'm so ingrained that I need to do hand hygiene afterwards that I actually will feel it in my hands, and that won't be relieved until I've done that because it's such an ingrained habit for me to do. So it's something that is easy, and that's what habit formation is. Our brains are wired naturally to want to follow the easiest route possible. And we want to spend time thinking about complex things and stuff sometimes, but for the most part, we want to make easy decisions. When something's a habit, you don't have to think about it. So your brain actually uses less energy, there's less stress, because we instantly go to what is comfortable and what is ingrained in us. And that's what a habit is. And so how then do we take what we want to do and make it a habit? And so it's easy. And the first thing is, and they call the book Atomic Habits for two reasons. One, atomic is small, right? And when we think about goals, if it's small, it fits in with what we want to do, that becomes easy. If it's really big, that's hard and we don't want to do it ultimately. But then on top of atomic, if we think about atomic energy, it's very powerful. And so you can use habits over time to really create powerful, big changes in your life, but it starts slowly and it builds from there. So small behavioral improvements, which then we can stack together, meaning we make one change, and we'll actually go through a scenario, and I'm happy to even discuss if someone has some scenarios that they're working on about maybe we could all problem solve it together. We stack new habits on top of the old habits that we have and slowly make more and more progress. And then here's the other thing is, our natural behavior is to follow the least effort, as we always want to come, again, do the easier things for ourselves as we make changes in our life. And the reverse is true. So let's say I want to stop a habit. So let's say I watch too much television. What's one way I could stop watching too much television?
Read.
I'm sorry?
Read.
Read, right. I could transition from reading to television. So I give myself an alternative of what I can do.
That's the same thing.
Yep, read. So that is me now stacking a habit. Maybe I say, well, before I go to bed, I'm going to try to read and not watch television. I still may gravitate it because it's easy for me to turn the TV on, right? And so pretend this clicker worked. I take the battery out of the clicker. Now suddenly I've made it hard to watch television, so now I have to actually go someplace, find the batteries and watch it, right? But maybe that's still not enough barrier for me. I put the TV in a closet. And now, maybe on Super Bowl Sunday, say, oh, I really want to watch the game, I'm going to get it out. But it's so much easier for me to pick up the book, right? Than actually have to go out of the closet, grab the TV, that's an extreme example, but I made it now hard to do the thing I don't want to do. And sometimes it's hard to change a habit because there's other people around you doing the type of thing that you want to be doing. And that makes it really difficult. And, like for instance, sometimes, and this is an extreme example as well, let's say somebody has a problem with opiates, drugs, things like that. Well, those sometimes people actually have to completely leave their environment because they get constant reminders, and so they have to actually remove that themselves from that. I'm not talking about those extremes, but those are extreme examples of changing habits. So, a couple things that we can do. Let's say we want to eat better, and I think that's something that's probably something I know I need to do better, and we all probably need to do better with it. First thing is controlling the temptation, right? And so make the thing you don't want to do more difficult. The best way is not to have those foods in your house. So I don't eat ice cream if my wife doesn't buy ice cream. Well, she buys it too frequently because she likes it too. My kids like it. But if it's not in the house, I don't eat it, right? And then I may have a piece of fruit or something like that for an evening snack as opposed to a bowl of ice cream. Here's the other thing. Don't go to the grocery store when you're hungry. We've all done it. And then you get home like, why do I have all this crud? But studies have actually shown, and the grocery stores love it when you do go hungry, people spend 1.5 times more at the grocery if they go hungry as opposed to not going hungry to the grocery. But here's another thing. Consider, anyone do curbside pickup ever at their grocery store?
I have, but not with my meat and produce.
Yeah, although you know what, I'm not putting an ad for any specific company, but my wife, during the pandemic, we switched to doing curbside. We used to go to Safeway. Now we do curbside pickup at Walmart. And just because it turned out to be so easy. And if you go there and let's say you get lettuce that's wilted, literally she just sends them, hey, my lettuce was wilted, and they just credit us back. But then you get stuck without having lettuce.
Exactly.
But it actually prevents you from buying a lot of stuff that you don't want by doing the curbside pickup, and it saves time. And so we love it, and occasionally we still have to go, to your point, or go to fruit stand or something like that instead. Anybody ever buy, and I'll raise my hand too, like snacks at the gas station? sodas or candy bars, things like that. Yeah. Gas stations, they make most of their money from food and alcohol, not from gasoline. Pay at the pump. Because if you go in there, if it's a problem for you, it may not be a problem for you. But if it's a problem for you, don't go in there, because then, what do they have right? You go in a gas station, what do you see? You see candy, candy and pepperoni sticks, and you have all the sodas and all that kind of stuff, because that's how they make their money. And so by paying at the pump, one, you can save a little bit. I guess one, you're going to save money because you're not buying junk, and two, you're not going to eat it because you never saw it, right? And those are just a couple ways. Eating your vegetables, I've said that like 5 times, 10 times maybe already. That's one of the most important things you can do. Like I mentioned, a great source of fiber, vitamins, and they fill you up. So if you eat your vegetables first, you're going to be better off. I happen to admit, I love potlucks. I love going to like a church potluck or something like that. And I don't always do the best job, but now I really try to remember, okay, I'm going to grab, ideally, maybe I'll be the one to bring it, or I'll grab some vegetables or something like that first, because it begins to fill me up. 1, 2, then there's less room on my plate for all that stuff that I'm going to probably try to eat a little bit of, but I definitely shouldn't eat a lot of. So fill it up with the vegetables, and then don't crowd your plate. In fact, sometimes people could use smaller bowls or plates, because psychologically, it makes you feel like, it's on your plate. But how many times in your life have you been told, finish everything that's on your plate? A lot, right? And so we are wired not to want to waste. And so we eat everything on our plate. So if you don't fill it as much, and then by a couple things you can do. Use smaller bowls and plates, and then in addition, leave a little space between each food. Like on Thanksgiving dinner, I don't know if any of you guys, I do this. Everything's touching because you get so much stuff. Well, if you leave a little space, you're going to eat less. And it generally takes 10, 20 minutes for your stomach to say, okay, I'm full. And so it ends up you overeat because you don't feel like you're full. But if you have more space, you complete what's on your plate, then your body also has time to register, okay, I think I've had enough. One of the worst things that we have in our society are sugary beverages. And it accounts for so much of our obesity. I remember in college, I had a friend, and he would drink at least a 12-pack of Coca-Cola a day. And he ballooned up, I think, well over 300 pounds. And one day he said, I'm not going to drink any more soda pop. And he quickly lost, I think, 50 or 100 pounds. It was amazing. Because he was drinking so much. So don't let this, close your eyes. How many calories is in a regular can of soda? If you've seen this. 150 calories generally is in a can of soda, which is 12 ounces. Okay? If you cut out 1 can of soda, let's say you drink a can of soda a day, you would lose about 15 pounds in a year in calories by just cutting that out. And here's the other reality is with those coffee drinks that probably, I know I love because it tastes so darn good, and I'm guessing most of us love, or energy drinks, fruit juice, they all tend to have that many calories or more. And here's the other thing. If you go to a fast food restaurant, are they giving you 12 ounces in your soda? You could get up to 44 ounces of soda. And of course, you can get as many refills as you want nowadays, too. You could easily consume 500-600 calories in just drinking soda pop. That's like a third of your calories you should eat in a day, and just drinking one of those 40 ounces of soda. And so it's one of the easiest tricks that you can do if you do it to lose weight is avoid sugary beverages. Another thing is sometimes we add unnecessary calories to your food. I'm not saying that you shouldn't add anything, but limit the amount of ranch dressing, other types of dressings, fats like that you eat. Because 2 tablespoons of ranch dressing has about 100 calories. So you're beginning to get almost a can of soda and just 2 tablespoons of your average dressing. And in fact, there are some times, and if you look, you go to a McDonald's where they show you your calories and stuff, and if you look, there are salads that may have more calories than the burger meal. And what do we do? I love this country because we could take, my wife makes a pretzel salad. It has pretzels, raspberry jello, cream cheese, sugar, and sometimes some whipped cream in it. And we call it a salad in this country, right? I'm healthy because I'm eating my pretzel salad. But the reality is, even a salad with lettuce, once you add your cheese, your eggs, your ham, or your taco salad, you could have more calories than you would, like I said, the burger meal. So watch that with your salads, because sometimes we think we're eating healthy because we're eating a salad, when in fact we're just plowing in more calories than probably what we need. And so limit the amount of dressings. I don't remember if any of you guys remember the commercial. It was a commercial, like a health commercial when I was a kid. It was "Don't drown your food." Really limit the amount of dressings and stuff, because it's an easy way to lose weight, because most times you're like, oh, you know what, I didn't need that much salad dressing, or I didn't need to add that additional cheese, and it was just fine when I did that. And then bring a healthy option to parties and stuff. Be the one that, maybe, I still think it'll be invited to more parties, but if you bring the fruit or the vegetable tray, and instead, you actually make it easier, not just for yourself, but for other people to make healthier choices too. And I'd love to see, as we become the healthiest community in the nation, we need to change that pattern where we're bringing healthy options. Not saying never to have something that, is really sweeter stuff, but watch overall. Questions about easy ways to cut out a few calories? Any questions about easy ways to cut out a few calories?
No.
So let's say, and we're going to talk about how we can form habits. Let's say our goal is to walk or maybe even jog in Summit Pacific's 5K race that's coming out in September. We do it every year. Well, a couple things. First is, don't necessarily focus on the goal of running a 5K as your everyday goal. It's great for maybe a long-term thing, but really focusing on small, gradual steps that you can take instead. And let's say I'm starting as a couch potato. Well, the first thing I want to do is create the habit of walking. And so when we're creating a habit, it's always great to verbalize it, because it's kind of that prompt for our brain of, yes, this is important. This is something that I want to do. So I'm going to verbalize, I'm going to walk 5 or 10 minutes every day, and I say my goal. Well, then I stack it onto a habit that I already do. And it could be different habit for each of us, but maybe I'm going to do it. I'm going to walk 5 minutes. I'm going to walk 5 to 10 minutes every day, and I'm going to do it right after I eat dinner, because I eat dinner every single day. Okay, so now I verbalized it, I stacked it, so I'm attaching it already to another habit that I do, so it's naturally a prompt. I eat dinner, okay, now I'm going to go do my run. Well, I say it, and then I make it easier to do. So I can take my running shoes, and I put it by my table, right? And that's now a prompt, plus now my shoes are there, I might as well just put them on and go, walk for 5 to 10 minutes. I may grab a partner. Accountability partner is one of the best ways to create a new habit, because if I don't want to do it, maybe my wife, she's going to join me on the journey. Well, she's going to do it, and maybe I don't do it one day, and she's like, okay, Kevin, we got to go for a walk. I go, all right, I'm going to go. Or vice versa, having that friend to kind of drive me to health as well. Or, another thing I do is I can set an alarm on my Alexa or whatever you have. About the time I eat dinner, you can even make them now say, okay, do your walk, or whatever you want to say. And so making it much easier to do what is right. Now, when we try to create a habit, you want to get into that routine. And there's different sciences, and different people say, well, how long it takes to habit. It depends on how often you do it, quite frankly. Because if you do something more regular during the day, it's easier than if you do something once a week or even every day. So you establish a routine. We're going to have bad days, right? The key is really trying not to miss second day. So if my goal is to work out 3 times a week, and on Wednesday I just get slammed from work and I can't do it, and normally I've been working out Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, I really need to make sure that I get into the gym again or whatever it may be on Friday, because then what will happen is I'll just continue with the habits as if I never missed. Once you miss that second day and get into the third day, whatever it may be, you lose the habit. And now not going to the gym is the easier thing because I don't think about it because I don't go to the gym anymore. So really try to avoid that second day of missing. Allow yourself grace, and even if you miss the second day, doesn't mean you have to give up. But really try avoiding that second day of missing it. And then add further habits. Okay, I'm going to start my walking, and now I want to add a little bit of strengthening exercises. So I'm going to do some planks, or maybe buy some dumbbells or something like that, and do a little bit of curls or something additional to what I'm doing. And stacking that on top of, I'm going to eat my dinner, I'm going to do my 10-minute walk, and now I'm going to do some workout with some dumbbells and a little bit of stretching. Gradually over time, and we tend to be more successful. And really, ultimately, we want to change our identity, right? I may see myself right now as a couch potato, but over time with work, I begin to think to myself, I'm somebody who's fit. Not somebody who's perfectly fit. I'll never be perfectly fit, but somebody who's fit and enjoys walking, enjoys exercise. You really take that on and own it. Anyone have anything that they're working on with habits or something that may be a challenge or questions about the process? Love to talk about this kind of thing. Well, finally, I just want to bring up what's called care signal. I know we talked about that at some of our summer care panels. And over the next few weeks, we're going to reach out to some people, in particular people who might have diabetes, congestive heart failure, or lung disease, what we call COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. And what care signal is basically a communication for individuals that prompt about wellness. And once again, it helps us with our habits. So let's say I have diabetes. What would occur is several times a week, what will occur is I'll maybe get a text, and they'll ask me, okay, how are your blood sugars? And then what it does is then I could put in my blood sugars. And there's a couple of things that occur. One, if I haven't been checking my blood sugars, then I'm like, I should probably check my blood sugars, right? It makes me think about my blood sugars and maybe, you know what? My blood sugars were a little high here. What did I eat? Or what did I do differently that made that blood sugar high? Or maybe my blood sugar actually is a little bit low. Well, what is different that brought this low, or what do I need to adjust? Do I need to change my insulin or some medication, right? And then if the numbers are actually, let's say, way off, we actually have a nurse who will monitor this, and then the nurse actually may get a hold of you and say, okay, what's going on? And try to help you problem solve together. And the advantage of that is we don't have, we love our hospital, but we don't want anyone to end up there. That's the funny thing about healthcare, right? You have a great hospital, but we'd rather you be at home and try to stop things from happening from being in crisis. And that's what Care Signal does. So reach out to you. If you get something from Care Signal and you want to do it, no one has to do this. You don't have to, it's something that we offer, but you don't have to do that. You just basically respond, and then you'll just get these texts. And you can stop that at any time. If you say, no, this is not for me, you stop it, and that's okay too. Questions about Care Signal? Yes?
It's not a question. I have it for my diabetes.
What do you think of it?
I like it.
Yeah.
I mean, I have the Dexcom. So I'm constantly checking my blood sugar. But it's nice to have someone else to, want to know how I'm doing and stuff.
Good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for
I
this.
actually like hearing that because I have a Dexcom also. I'm actually getting the Dexcom 7 next month.
Oh, really? I have the Dexcom 6, so.
Yeah, the Dexcom 7 just came out, and Amerigroup does cover it.
Do you know what Dexcom? Anyone know what Dex does not know it? Yeah. Can you tell just for the group what a Dexcom does?
It's a
It's a continuous glucose monitor.
Yeah.
Me, I have attached to my phone. I tried the Freestyle Libre first. I did not care for that one. It kept going. It's like you get a new one every 14 days, but it would go out in 9. And you had to sit here and go like this all the time. Where with the Dexcom, I literally just open an app on my phone and it gives me my blood sugar when it opens.
Yeah, how accurate is yours? stay?
For the most part, there's been a couple times, but it's been like I'll have a faulty sensor. I'll contact Dexcom and within a week I have a replacement sensor. They're really good about that, but it literally gives me my blood sugars. And this helped me so much in initially getting my blood sugars under control.
Yeah.
Because with this, I was able to see spikes hours after I ate.
Mhm.
Where just testing 2 to 3 times a day, we weren't seeing that. I was having spikes at like 3:30 in the morning when I ate at 6 o'clock in the evening, so.
Yeah,
The
I like
continuous
that one.
monitors are awesome.
Thank you. And I love us all learning together. So what we talked about today, a couple of health fallacies, including the food pyramid, the fact that any exercise is better, and when we lose weight, we don't want to lose weight ideally too quickly, and add strengthening exercise as well. We talked about what we can do to improve our health, and really studies showed that by controlling our weight, eating a good diet like the Mediterranean diet, and high and more complex, whole grain carbohydrates, fruits and vegetables in particular, and fats like olive oils, nuts, stuff like that, as opposed to red meats, people are healthier. And then we talked about how we could start new habits. Would love to entertain questions or talk about something completely different. I'm here. Let's chat. Or if somebody has something that they're doing that really works well to make yourself healthier, I would love to just share with each other too. Yes.
I love avocado. Are they healthy?
You live on?
I love avocado.
Actually, avocados, you are correct. I would say anything in, not going too crazy, but avocados actually have the good fats with them. And they taste really good too.
Oh, they're delicious.
Have you ever had avocado toast?
Huh?
Avocado toast?
No.
Avocado toast is wonderful.
My mom cooks with avocado oil.
Mm-hmm.
She says that it doesn't burn as fast as olive oil does.
I've never used avocado oil specifically.
I haven't either.
And
My mom loves it.
But avocados have the good fat. So yeah, they tend to be a good source of, and actually have a good amount of fiber too. So
Yeah.
avocados are very healthy.
Yeah, I used to, before I found out I was diabetic, I'd smash them up, and instead of using mayonnaise for a sandwich, I would smash up my avocado and put that on my bread.
It's a better alternative.
Oh, it is delicious.
Good question.
I still not like them, and then also I like them.
I like avocado, but I don't eat a lot of it. But if I made like small container I guess you call it guacamole, so that's basically wrapped avocado.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Spread it on the bread, and then instead of having 2 slices of bread in the bag, I do one, and I put like ham and cheese with it with avocado. And that makes a great lunch.
mm-hmm.
I enjoy doing that.
And you raise a good point too, is we could decrease the amount of simple carbohydrates we have by just using 1 slice of bread. That's another way to do it. Or some people will even, as opposed to using bread, they use lettuce wraps.
Oh, those are good.
Things like that as well. Just got to watch what you put in it.
My biggest setback I have in a lot of the lettuce wraps or fresh vegetables, I have no teeth. I'm working on that, but it is really hard to find snacks or things like that because I do like my ice cream also too.
Yeah.
I usually try to stick to like the Sweet Freedoms or the Dreyer's has a low sugar, low fat one. I found out I don't like the Dreyer's carb ready one though. But other than that, it's really hard to find healthy snacks that I can chew.
No, you raise up a really good point. Obviously, avocados are great because they're soft. And so that would be a good option for you. Some fruits, you still have to watch, you don't want to eat incredibly amount of fruits because fruits also are higher in sugar.
Right.
It's better for you than like fruit juice because you get the fiber which spreads the absorption of the sugar in most fruits as well. I'm just trying to problem solve. Sometimes you got to watch what you put in as well. Though people will drink more smoothies, and you can put vegetables and things like that. You got to watch your smoothies though, because depending on what you add onto it, you really got to watch the calories. Because the only problem about drinking calories is you tend to feel less full because it's a liquid,
But
and it goes through you more quickly.
I run into the issue with my blood sugars and the fruits and the sugars and the fruits because some foods it seems like my blood sugars react more to than others. But at the same time, it's like I can have one day I eat something and then it don't affect my blood sugars and then like 2-3 days later I eat the same thing and my blood sugar shoots got high.
I have one more idea, and then we'll get to you, Jennifer. You could try like almond butter or something like that. It's as opposed to like eating a red meat, okay? Because you're gonna get more of the good fats with that. Still pretty high in calories, but you're getting better fats than if you're eating red meat or something. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Now because I can have smoothies, Sarah is my nutritionist, and we go over to smoothies. One of the things that we do is, I can do it with like the glucerna powder.
Yeah.
Which is supposed to help with your sugar intake. And I also use the almond milk that is unsweetened and put in there. And because we could have up to at least 25 grams of added sugars a day compared to other people, we're only supposed to have 25 grams of added sugars. So I do the smoothies with the fruits and a little bit of vegetables, but I use the glucerna powder and the almond milk, or you could use, instead, if you don't have the glucerna powder, you can also use like a teaspoon of peanut butter to add to your smoothie too, because that gives you more of your protein that that you should be having and all that.
Yeah, Sarah gave me some samples of the Ensure Max Protein and Glucerna shakes because I have a very bad habit of skipping lunch.
Sure.
I get so busy that, because I'm on the go constantly, but the problem again is having money.
Well,
Especially,
yeah,
those insurance are very
as we were
expensive.
talking last night, pandemic food stamps
Yep.
ended. So I went from getting $500 in food stamps to $35.
The pandemic food stamps ended, and a lot of people are
And so,
are going without stuff that they normally would have gotten because of the pandemic food stamps ending. So they can't afford all of those nutrition stuff that we used
I
to be
make
able
the
to
Food
get.
RX stretch as much as possible, but like breakfasts and snacks and lunches, sometimes it's.
That's why I do the smoothies at breakfast, because I tend to skip breakfast, and I'm starting to do that lunchtime too, because trying to get food stamps to stretch and get enough, it doesn't work.
Breakfast is the one I try not to skip because it's the most important meal of the day. It gets your brain going.
That's where somebody gets in.
I have found too, if anybody, you know the chia plants?
Yeah.
Okay, well, you can get chia seeds. And if you take them, and my sister does this, and she's a registered nurse. And if you take them and you soak them in milk, they'll thicken it up, and it's almost like a yogurt. But she uses almond milk or some other milk derivative, but I use them in my smoothies.
I've thrown chia seeds in my smoothies.
Yeah, I
I'm
like
not
them
a
in my
big
smoothie.
milk drinker, and I tried even switching to almond milk in my coffee. That's where I still could go, but I did switch my sugar. That's why when I have tea, I carry stevia
Yeah,
in my purse, so when I go to restaurants or
Yeah.
something, I can have
My only
tea
thing
or
with
coffee.
that, is I cannot use stevia in my hot beverages, so, and I do cheat. My creamer is the only excess amount of sugar that I get.
What kind of creamer do you get?
Snickers.
I was thinking, I've been, and Kevin, I'm gonna say this, I had the worst caffeinated headache since I've been taking off the creamers.
You're not
Going
drinking
straight
the
to
coffee?
teas,
Half.
because I cannot go without my coffee, and I won't drink it black, and I cannot stand drinking tea without anything in it.
But now, there are
So now I
some,
have I get caffeinated.
Oh, I'm sorry.
there are some creamers that I like that are sugar-free.
Yeah.
The caramel macchiato is really good.
There's also the, you can get like the silk ones, but I found one that's Splenda, but my husband told me I can't have it since I was taking off my creamers.
Well, here's the thing that I found with the sugar-free ones, is some of those will even spike my sugars because of the sugar alcohol.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
And
I-
that's why.
The other dilemma I have is I live in a house with 3 other people.
That's the hardest.
And it's really fun because I'm a cook. Which is even harder because like the other night when I made fish tacos for me, I made them pork chops and french fries and canned green beans. And it's like, I got them to switch from whole milk down to 2%, so we did do that switch. But it's real, that's where the difficulty lies too, is it's like, I've been able to get some of what for me, but yeah.
And that, I think, is one of the biggest challenges for all of us. The one other thing I would say is, if you do switch to something that's like sugar-free, or you see stuff that's like low-fat, low cholesterol, look at the back still, because people who sell food, they're really smart, and they throw out those healthy terms when sometimes the food isn't healthy. So something could be like no added sugar, but have an incredible amount of cholesterol and fat and lots of calories. Or something could be cholesterol-free cookies, right? Or fat-free cookies. Well, they just dump more sugar in it.
Mhm.
And so even, look, if it sounds good and it tastes too good to be true, unless it's natural, it may be too good to be true still.
I was actually surprised Walmart has a sugar-free whipped cream that is actually 0.
And it is really
It
good
is,
too.
doesn't have,
you
you
go.
look down and it's like, I think the only thing on it might be a 2, but it's just,
So yeah, it's very, yeah.
And it is really good.
it is. It looks a little funny.
Yeah.
It doesn't come out as
But it
smoke,
works.
but I used it on no sugar added hot cocoa and my ice cream.
Good for you. Well, I just really appreciate you guys all just getting your work and your efforts, and
I appreciate this program.
Oh, I do too.
So do I.
It's helped a lot because I've already had a good amount of weight loss, but first month of February I didn't have any, but see Sarah, we talked about it, and it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Because I did have such a substantial loss in my first month. I lost 13 pounds in my first month. So the second month I didn't have really any weight loss, and so I got the 28 pounds this month. I think I've lost more weight, but
good for you.
the biggest thing is my diabetes is under control. My insulin's going down. So that's been a big deal. In the last 2 weeks, I've gone down, I think, another 6 units on my insulin.
That's
So,
awesome. Do any of you guys have Amazon?
yes.
There's actually some interesting shows, and I tend to be somebody who's moderation for most things. But there are actually some shows that they've looked at people who've really changed their diet significantly. And for like 2 weeks, they just eat plant-based food. And I tell you, they looked at these people's numbers before and afterwards, like cholesterol levels and stuff like that, triglycerides. It's amazing the difference that just in a few weeks of switching and improving your diet. And it's hard. It's hard, but it really does help a lot. Go ahead.
For me, and some people think I'm crazy, I love pickles, dill pickles, and I love dill pickle juice. I just love it. And I used to, before I moved here, I would drink a cup of dill pickle juice a day. And I would eat a dill pickle.
Yeah, I've heard of people doing
And
that.
I was losing weight.
Yeah, I've heard of people doing
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, pickles are low calories. Just gotta watch the salt. If
Yeah.
you have high blood pressure, some people
I
it
don't
doesn't
have
matter.
that yet, thank God.
That's the one thing.
Unfortunately, that's,
Because there's some stuff that comes in the food RX, like the chicken broth.
Mhm.
I can't use it because it is loaded with sodium, even though it says low sodium.
It still has a lot
It
of
still
sodium.
has a lot of sodium in it. I could go, like I was telling her yesterday at a cooking class, I could go and have maybe like 7 milligrams of sodium, and my feet are telling me that, oh no, you can't have this. It's like, and that's even like a juice packet.
Yeah,
I can't even, because it's loaded, there's sodium in it, and it's like, are you kidding me?
the only way to get, for me, that I don't know, to get away from sodium is fresh, frozen, that's it.
yeah, I
Or grow
don't,
your own and make your
yeah,
own.
I don't eat a lot of added sodium or something, that's why like with the chicken piccata recipe, I can't do the capers because they're like,
Oh, yeah.
I can't. if I do solid sea salt, but I have to take HCPZ because if I don't, I swell up.
Yeah,
So I fully understand about the swelling, it's not fun.
no, it's not, especially when your feet start hurting and you know that you only have a little bit of sodium that you know
Right.
of. And you're having to sit there and it's like, okay, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be out doing something.
Yeah.
And you can't if you're swollen because you look like a balloon.
Yeah, they had to put me on medication because my sodium level on my blood work was fine. It was always in the lower end, but I would like swell up and so. But it's fun with this diet because it's like I'm not only having to watch my blood sugar, my cholesterol, I have high blood pressure. I gotta watch foods that can increase sleepiness because I'm narcoleptic. I've got, yeah, it's just, and this Food RX program has helped a lot with learning what foods are good for inflammation and pain, control somewhat. But, yeah, it's a lot of balancing act with me.
I think that's where moderation comes in.
Yeah.
Everything's a balance.
But the pickles I can't do because I don't do cucumbers either.
Oh, really?
No.
Oh, now, see, I can take a cucumber and peel it and cut it up and put lemon juice over it.
Yeah.
Oh, and just,
I tried the first week of the RX program, it was in a salad, and we cut it up really small, but I couldn't do it.
Well, thank you guys all so much.
Oh, yeah.
Once again, acknowledge Lisa and Madison. Thank you guys for great work. Really appreciate it.
I love these classes because of not just learning from you guys, but we learn from each other.
No, you guys are the most valuable part.
Yeah,
There's no doubt
even in
about
our
that.
cooking classes, we're communicating, we're talking,
Yeah, like last night on.
Last night, I became the commercial, the official commercial. Everybody asks